Hi everyone, welcome to BODHI. My name's Alex Nashton and I'm going to be guiding you through a 40-minute long beginner's yoga class. So joining me today is Christopher Yates, the videographical genius behind these productions, and also a not broken demonstrator for today. Chris has had a broken thumb for the past few weeks, but he is now fully recovered and able to demonstrate all of the shapes and poses. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you have, for tonight's class, something soft and cushiony, like maybe a blanket or a pillow or a bolster, just because in a yoga practice, we do spend quite a bit of time putting pressure onto our wrists or putting pressure onto our kneecaps, and our knees and wrists don't necessarily always like that, so have something to cushion you. And then you're also gonna wanna have blocks nearby. I usually recommend 2 for a practice like this. Although if you don't have blocks at home, you can use whatever you've got handy. So old shoe boxes work, even old DVD sets or some really thick old textbooks, any of that will do. And then once you've got it handy, you're gonna come up to a comfortable seated position. And I'm gonna recommend that you find Sukhasana or easy seat to start, which means that you might have one shin in front of the other shin here, like I'm sitting or like Chris is sitting, but you also might have your ankles crossed in front of you, and that's totally fine as well. Most of us, as we immediately come into this seat, because of our poor postural patterns, we'll find quite a bit of rounding in the lowest part of the spine, and ideally in this practice we want to find length and integrity in the spine. So I usually recommend that you sit up on something, whether that's a block like I'm sitting on right now, or maybe even just using a bolster. And then as you find that bolster, as you find that block underneath your seat, you're gonna bring your sitting bones to the edge of that thing, to the edge of that bolster, to the edge of that block. And as the sitting bones, or those 2 boniest part of your butt, approach that edge, you'll find this kind of tilt in the weight of your pelvis forward, so your pubic bone begins to drop down in the front as your sitting bones kind of revolve back. And that immediately will help you find a little more arch in the lowest part of your back, so you can then lengthen out the rest of it. Bring the palms of your hands to your thighs. They'll face down for today. Your eyes will close. And you'll find space between the shoulders and the ears. If you've taken my class before, you might be familiar with Nadi Shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing. And the technique that we're going to start with today is very similar, except we won't actually be using our fingers. We won't use the manipulation of our hands to regulate the flow of breath between our nostrils. Instead, we'll just use our attention. We'll just use our awareness. Because we know that whatever we put across the screen of the mind, the body believes is actually happening. So just by bringing our awareness to different aspects of our breath, to different ways that we breathe, we can have a very real, very physical impact on the movement of the breath through the body. And so in this seat with the palms of your hands facing down, you're gonna pay attention to the way your breath moves in and out of your nostrils. And at this moment in time, you might very clearly feel one nostril a little more opened or dominant than the other. You might feel one side a little stuffy or a little blocked, and that's normal too. But as you next inhale, I invite you to focus your attention on your right side nostril and imagine that you could only breathe in through the right side. And at the top of that inhale, you'll pause and you'll shift your awareness over to your left side nostril, and you'll imagine that you could only breathe out through the left side. You'll inhale once again through that same side, so through the left side, the one you just breathed out of. At the top of your breath in, you pause and switch your attention over to the right side and imagine that you could only breathe out through the right side. You'll inhale through the right side again. You'll exhale and put more tension on the left side. Still focusing on the left side, you inhale. At the top of your inhale, you shift your awareness over to the right side and focus there as you exhale. You inhale right side again. Exhale left. Inhale left side. Exhale right. You'll stay with it for these next few moments on your own, and know that we typically move through a practice like this, or any practice that regulates the flow of breath between the nostrils, because there's this very interconnected relationship between the nostril that is dominant and the brain hemisphere that is dominant. And we'll always have one side that's a little more dominant than the other, but when we transition dominance from one side to the next, there's this kind of very brief interim phase where instead of switching dominance for a moment, the nostrils and the brain hemispheres will come into harmony, they'll come into balance. So when we regulate the flow of breath evenly between the nostrils, we in turn balance the brain hemispheres. And that helps us cultivate a little more focus, a little more precision, so we can begin to jump into our practice with a little more ease and presence. So in your own time, you'll let that awareness of your nostrils just kind of drift away. You'll release your chin down to your chest, invite the back of your neck to lengthen, and blink your eyes open. You'll take in a point on the floor in front of you, and then you'll switch the crossing of your legs here. So if one ankle was underneath the other, you'll switch the one that's on top, or you'll switch the shin that's in front. And then with that positioning of your hips, you'll find a lengthened spine again, so you'll let your gaze come up to kind of take in the room around you. You'll breathe in and reach your arms around and up to the sky. As you exhale, you'll bring your right fingertips down to the ground. You'll inhale and extend your left fingertips up before walking your right fingertips over to the right. So as you walk the right fingertips over to the right, you're lengthening out the left waistline, and I want you to think about really sitting down through your left sitting bone a little bit more. So putting a little more weight into the left side of the pelvis, into the left hip, so you keep it anchored down as you extend through the left waistline. Now, many of us tend to let the chest collapse down here as we reach up and over, but instead I want you to think about keeping your collarbones spread wide apart here, and maybe even letting your gaze turn up towards the sky underneath that left arm. There is what we call an external rotation in that left shoulder, so it's almost like as you reach your left fingertips up and over, you are trying to shake someone's hand in front of you. So the thumb side of your hand spins up, the pinky side of your hand spins down towards the ground. And now you'll inhale and bring yourself back to center. Both arms will reach up to the sky. You'll exhale and release your left fingertips down. You walk your left fingertips out to the left. The right fingertips reach up and over this time. And as the right fingertips reach up and over, you're making sure that the right seat stays anchored down, that the right side pelvis gets a little bit heavier here, and that you're working to lengthen the right waistline from the right hip out through the right armpit and revolve that right shoulder in its socket, so it's like you are turning your whole right arm to shake someone's hand that's over on your left side. We'll take a few more breaths here. For these last few breaths, you might let your gaze, you might let your chest lift up towards the sky just a little bit more. You'll inhale and reach both arms up to the sky again. And now you'll exhale and release your hands down. And you'll begin to walk your fingertips out in front of you, keeping length in your spine here, so the sitting bones stay plugged down and back as you fight your fight to maintain that length. So your chest moves forward and up, and rather than jutting your chin forward here, you're going to keep your chin in towards your throat so there's balance between the front and back of the neck. And now you walk your fingertips over to the right, pushing down through your left sitting bone just a little bit more. And now you'll walk your fingertips back to center and walk them over to the left. Anchoring down through the right sitting bone just a little bit more. Make sure you're still breathing. And that your heart is reaching forward so you're not letting the upper back round or collapse down towards the ground here. Inhale, bring yourself back to center. And then slowly walk yourself up. We're gonna switch the crossing of the legs just one last time so we can open the hips evenly here. And then you'll start by finding length in your spine. From that place of length, you make sure the sitting bones stay glued down to whatever is underneath you as you walk your fingertips forward. With the fingertips walking forward, you're gonna begin to kind of take them over to the left this time. So gluing your right sitting bone down, elongating your right waistline, elongating your right side rib cage. Make sure your chest isn't collapsing here, but that you're keeping your heart moving forward. And now you slowly breathe in and bring yourself back to center. And then take it over to the right side. So staying up high on your fingertips, chest is not collapsing down, you keep length. Make sure your left butt stays glued to the mat behind you. And now you'll slowly come back to center. Walk your fingertips in closer towards your body. And if you are sitting on something, you can take that out of the way now. So you'll slide your block, you'll slide your blanket, you'll slide your pillow out of the way, and you'll bring yourself forward onto all fours. And from all fours, we're gonna make our way back into a downward facing dog. So you can tuck your toes under. You'll walk your hands a little further out in front of your shoulders. And you'll begin to put a little more weight into the palms of your hands and really try to anchor the weight more into the finger knuckle parts of your palms rather than your wrists. So pushing down through the space between your thumb and your first finger, you find length along the sides of your waist. So as you glue down the palms of the hands, as you push the floor away from you, you elevate your sitting bones, you elevate your hips, and you reach your heels down towards the floor. So working to lengthen out the backs of your legs. Now, many of us, as we come into downward facing dog, or as we come into any standing pose for that matter, we tend to let the knees collapse in towards each other. So I want you to think about drawing your knees apart so your knees are just as wide as your ankles. Slowly start to walk your feet forward towards your hands. So you're coming into a forward fold somewhere near the top of your mat. As you come into that fold, we still want to be sure that the feet are inner hip distance apart. If you need to measure that, you take your two fists side by side between the highest part of each arch, and that'll kind of give you the right proportion, that'll kind of give you the right distance. Once you've got it, you make sure your knees are still squeezing towards each other. And then take your hands to your shins, and find a halfway lift, so find a flat back here. And know that many of us tend to kind of stick our butts back like Chris is doing right now. You're gonna wanna take a little more weight forward towards your toes. So you're stacking your hips over your ankles here. You pull your spine longer from your tailbone to the crown of your head. And now keeping your hips perched over your ankles, you hollow out your belly, so you squeeze your belly button in towards your spine, and you let your upper body relax down. Beautiful. Inhale, reach your arms all the way around and up to the sky. Come to stand all the way up. As you exhale, you'll bring palms of your hands to touch at the center of your chest. Inhale, sweep your fingertips around and up. Exhale, swan dive yourself forward and down. So you keep lengthening your spine for as long as you can. When you can't maintain the length anymore, you let everything in your upper back drop. Inhale, take your hands to your shins, find a flat back. Exhale, let your upper body relax down and fold forward here. Inhale, your fingertips sweep all the way around and up to the sky. You come to stand all the way up. Exhale, bring the palms of your hands to touch at the center of your chest. So we're going to move through these half sun salutations 2 more times. You'll inhale and sweep the fingertips around and up. Think about pulling the sides of the waist longer here as you do. You'll exhale and dive yourself forward and down. Backs of the legs lengthen. Inhale, find a halfway lift, find a flat back. Exhale, bend your knees, plant your hands. Let your upper body relax down. Legs lengthen. Inhale, reach your fingertips all the way around and up to the sky. Come to stand all the way up. Exhale, palms of your hands touch at the center of your chest. We'll do that one more time. You breathe in and sweep your fingertips all the way around and up. You exhale and dive yourself forward and down, Uttanasana. Inhale, halfway lift, Ardha Uttanasana. Exhale, release forward again. Last time, you breathe in and sweep your fingertips all the way around and up to the sky. Exhale, palms of your hands come to touch at the center of your chest. And now you're going to pause this time, and you're going to separate your feet so they're inner hip distance apart if they shifted at all. You're going to bend your knees, sit your butt down and back for a chair pose. Reach your arms up so the arm bones frame the ears. And now in this shape, you're going to very intentionally bring a little more weight back onto your heels, a little less on your toes. Keep the bend in your knees, keep your butt low. Shoulders relax down the back away from the ears, and you're still breathing here. So know that shaking is very normal in this shape, especially for those of us who haven't used our legs in quite some time. So belly button squeezes in. Yeah, and then rather than letting your rib cage flare forward here, think about pulling bottom 2 ribs in towards each other, making space across the backs of the lungs. With your next breath in, you can straighten your legs, reach your fingertips up a little bit higher, and then exhale, bring the palms of your hands to touch at the center of your chest. Now, you can turn yourself about 90 degrees on your mat, so you're facing the wide edge of your mat. And you're going to step your right foot towards the back of your mat. Your stance is going to be pretty wide. You want to make sure that your heels are even here to start. So heels are in one long line. And then you'll ever so slightly turn both of your toes in. So it's almost like you're a little pigeon-toed here. Now, many of us tend to let the inner arches of the feet kind of collapse down, so I want you to think about pushing into the pinky toe sides of your feet a little bit more and lifting up through the inner arches. With that lift, think about finding activation in your legs as if you could pull the front and the back ends of the mat towards each other with your feet. And as you feel that engagement, as you feel your legs waking up, you're going to turn your right toes another 90 degrees towards the back of the mat. Now make sure that your thigh is active, that your right thigh is turning in the same direction as your toes, that it's not knocking in here. And then put a bend into your right knee and bring your arms out to a T shape. So coming into a warrior 2, Virabhadrasana 2. This right knee bends to 90. And ideally, one day, we'll have the right thigh parallel with the ground beneath us. But know that if that's just a little too intense to start out here, you can have your legs in a little bit closer towards each other so there's more of an incline, there's more of a slope to the right thigh. The shoulders are kind of trying to spread wider apart here. Like you could create a little extra width across the front of the chest. And now you're going to flip the palm of your right hand to face up. Keep your lower body exactly as it is, but take your left hand to the back of your left thigh and reach your right fingertips up towards the sky as you slide the left hand down the back of the left leg. So we're coming to reverse our warrior here to create a little extra length, a little extra space along the right waistline. Now make sure that as you reverse your warrior, your right knee is not knocking in towards center, but instead you keep your right knee on the same trajectory as your toes. If anything, you can think about pressing your right knee to the right just a little bit more. Take another breath in here. And as you exhale, straighten your right leg. Come up to a T shape with your arms, and then you'll shorten your stance just a tiny bit by walking your left foot in about 1 or 2 steps. Beautiful, and then you'll angle these left toes to face the back left corner of your mat just a little bit more. Nope, other way, Chris. Yeah, so you're internally rotating that left leg. Good, but you want to keep the hips kind of open here. So the right hip is still kind of reaching forward. The left hip revolves back. Your arms are still in that T shape. Arms are still in a T shape, Chris. And then you're going to reach your right fingertips forward as you pivot your hips back. And then right hand comes down to either your shin, to the floor, maybe even to a block. Your left fingertips extend up towards the sky for Trikonasana, for triangle pose. Good. So in this triangle pose, ideally, we're finding enough height underneath the right hand that we can lengthen out the right side waist. So if you're noticing that the right waistline kind of curves here like Chris is demonstrating, you're going to want to think about pulling your right hip towards your left heel. So pulling your right hip away from your right armpit, lengthening your right waistline just a little bit more. Beautiful. And then maybe our last little piece is turning the gaze up towards the left fingertips. Nice. We'll take a breath in here and a breath out. Another inhale. Another exhale. And then still think about using your feet to pull the front and back ends of the mat towards each other and bring your upper body up, for lack of a better directional phrase, so that your shoulders balance over your hips once again. And now you're going to turn your right toes in. And you're going to need to widen your stance, just like you did before we started this whole process on the right side. You're ever so slightly pigeon-toed to start, and then your left toes turn to face the back of your mat. You bend into your left knee and extend your arms out to a T shape. Beautiful. So sliding into a warrior two, you're still thinking about using your feet to pull the front and back ends of the mat together. Ideally, one day, the left thigh will be parallel to the ground beneath us, but if that's not happening today, that's all right. There can be a little bit of an incline here. What I'm more concerned with is that your left knee is not knocking in towards center, but that you're still keeping your left knee on the same trajectory as your toes. So think about pressing your left knee to the left just a tiny bit more. Now right hand comes to the back of the right thigh. You turn the palm of your left hand to face up. You breathe in and reach your left fingertips up and then back behind you. Keep the bend in your left knee and keep pressing your left knee to the left. So you're not letting any of it knock in here. You're giving yourself space. Beautiful. Still using the feet to pull the front and back ends of the mat together. And then you're slowly going to bring your torso up so your shoulders balance over your hips again. Your arms come out to a T shape. You straighten the left leg. You'll shorten your stance just a little bit by walking your right foot in 1 or 2 steps. You can angle the right toes forward towards the top right corner of your mat just a little bit more. And now with your arms in that T shape, you're going to pivot your hips back as you reach your left fingertips forward, 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 and then down to either a block, maybe even 2 blocks, maybe your shin, or maybe the ground if that feels accessible for you here. Make sure the big toe mound of your left foot stays anchored down, that you're not letting it roll up away from the floor. Your left hip is pulling away from your left armpit. So remember, if you did so on the last side, or if you're finding it again here, that kind of arcing or rainbowing of the spine, we want to find length. We want to find balance between the left side and the right side. And even if you're using something like a block or 2 blocks or your shin underneath you for support, the left shoulder is moving down the back away from the ear. Nice. Let's take 2 more breaths here. 1 more inhale. With your exhale, still think about dragging your feet towards each other and draw your shoulders up so they stack over your hips. You'll turn your left toes in, and now you'll simultaneously turn both toes out at about 45-degree angle. So now the heels are in a little bit closer than the toes. You're going to bend into both of your knees, and notice how as you bend into the knees, there's a tendency for them to kind of fall forward here. I want you to think about sending your knees back behind you, so pressing your knees in the same direction as your toes. And now in this shape, you can bring your arms up to a cactus shape. You might even optionally interlace your fingers at the back of your head. Keep sitting yourself down into that goddess pose, so tailbone lengthens down, your pubic bone in the front lifts up, and now we're just going to work to lengthen out the sides of the waist a little bit more. So as you inhale, you find length. And as you exhale, you curl your right elbow tip towards your right thigh. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to touch. You inhale and come back to center. Still think about pressing your knees apart. You exhale and try to curl your left elbow towards your left thigh. Inhale, come back to center. Exhale to the right. Inhale brings you center. You exhale to the left. We're going to do 1 more round each side. Inhale, center. Exhale, right. Inhale, center. Exhale, left. This time as you breathe in and come back to center, you'll push down through your feet, straighten your legs. Walk your toes in. You can heel toe them all the way back in so your feet are pretty close towards each other. And then let go of your arms. And if you need to kind of jiggle or move around your legs, you are more than welcome to. And then eventually you'll turn yourself another 90 degrees so you're back facing the top of your mat once again. Your feet are inner hip distance apart. You inhale and sweep your fingertips around and up towards the sky. Exhale, dive yourself forward and all the way down, so coming into a fold. Inhale, lift yourself halfway up and then pause in this halfway lift. Walk your hands up onto your shins. You might even walk them all the way up onto your thighs. You're going to widen your stance just a bit more than you normally do. Good, and from this halfway lift, draw your shoulders away from your ears. Turn your toes out at about 45 degrees. Bring the palms of your hands to a prayer pose at the center of your chest. And now you're going to begin to bend into your knees and either rest your forearms on your thighs, or you'll bend your knees so much that you drop your hips a little bit closer to the ground, a little bit closer to your heels or to your ankles, coming into malasana or squat pose. Now, if you're finding that your heels can't quite make it to the ground, a really nice option here is to slide a rolled up blanket underneath the heels, or maybe even optionally coming to sit up on one of your blocks. So Chris, I'm going to give you a block so you can demonstrate that. Yeah, good. Whatever variation you're choosing, I want you to think about using your elbows, using your triceps to press your knees apart, because they really do have a tendency to cave in here. It's what we've been talking about all class long. So think about anchoring down through the pinky toe sides of your feet, lifting up through the inner arches, and sending your knees further and further apart. You also want to be sure that you're still breathing here, that you haven't lost track of your breath. And now from this shape, you're going to release your fingertips down to the ground in front of you. And you're going to very slowly start to tilt a little more weight forward towards the balls of your feet. And eventually, you'll bring your knees to the ground in front of you. So you might need to walk your hands forward as you do. The tops of your feet find the floor. Your big toes come to touch. Your knees can be a little bit further apart. You'll draw your hips back towards your heels for a child's pose. The palms of your hands can either stay on the ground in front of you, or like Chris is demonstrating, you can wrap your arms around you so the backs of your hands rest on the ground a little bit closer to your heels, palms facing up. And know that we definitely want to make sure the forehead is supported by something here. So you might slide a block underneath the forehead. You might just let it rest on the ground, and that's great too. Chris is pretty flexible, but if you are finding some space between your hips and your heels, you don't have to force the hips down. You don't need to push or jam them down. But instead, just let your body kind of breathe through it and notice how that pattern of breath will change the structuring of your body in this shape. I'll give you a little more time here. Now, from this shape, you'll slide the palms of your hands down to the ground in front of you. You'll press yourself up onto all fours, and then you'll pause there. You're gonna take the top end of your mat, and you're gonna fold it back towards you so you give yourself a much thicker mat there at the top. And now we're gonna begin to rotate ourselves once again about 90 degrees, but as you rotate 90 degrees, you'll land with both knees on that folded over edge of the mat. So Chris, you might wanna fold it back a little bit more so you have a much smaller portion of your mat. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the knees are on the cushion part of the mat that's doubled over. You're gonna come onto hands and knees, so hands are still on the ground beside you, and then you're gonna take either your pillow or your bolster or even your blanket beside you. If your pillow or your bolster is really, really thick, I would maybe recommend using a blanket instead. But you're gonna take one knee on that folded edge of the blanket, and then the other one is gonna come up onto this bolster or pillow. Good. So one knee on the mat, one knee on the pillow. You're gonna slowly start to kind of push this pillow or push this blanket away from the mat. Yeah. Good. And so as you do, I want you to make sure that your toes are turning away from center. So your feet are facing the right and the left. They're moving in two different directions. And if it's accessible for you here, like Chris is demonstrating, you can lower your forearms down onto the ground. And know that this frog pose, it tends to be very intense for most of us. It forces us to open into the hip flexors, open into the groin quite a bit more than many of us are comfortable doing. But really be sure here that you're not letting it kind of just move into the upper body. So rather than allowing the upper body, rather than allowing the rib cage to kind of drop down towards the ground, you're keeping belly button squeezing in towards the spine, bottom two ribs curled in towards each other. Your toes are facing the right and the left, so your inner ankles, your inner arches are here on the ground. And now you want to be sure that your hips are directly in alignment with your knees. Many of us tend to either sit way too far back like a child's pose, or we tend to be so far forward that we can't quite find any sensation here. But we're going to stay just a little bit longer. And as you stay, you'll notice that gravity kind of works on the opening of your hips here just a little bit more. Make sure that you're breathing through all of it despite the discomfort, that you're maintaining that containment in the front plane of your body. And now to slowly ease yourself out of it, I want you to first think about bringing big toes to touch. And then maybe coming up onto one hand and then the other hand before you gently slide or walk your knees back in towards each other. And then we'll give you another quarter turn on your mat. So you're coming back to the normal positioning on the mat. You can unfold it. Wrists are going to be under the shoulders, knees are under the hips. You're just going to circle your hips over your knees for a moment. So moving the hips around in any way that you might feel called to. Kind of releasing that last shape, releasing that last position. And then in your own time, you're going to bend through your elbows, make your way down onto your belly. And roll yourself over onto your back for Shavasana. So for our final resting shape, I usually recommend that for this one, you either let the palms of your hands face up beside you, or you can alternatively take one hand to your belly and one hand to your chest. If there's any tension in your lower back, you can slide your bolster or your pillow underneath your knees. So that will help put a very natural bend into your knees that alleviates strain on the lower back. You'll give yourself time here just to kind of marinate in the benefit of your practice. To rest in the change that you have created. And for these last few moments, let your breath get a little bit easier, a little less forced. And with that easiness, cultivate a little more awareness. And maintaining that softness, you'll begin to kind of wiggle your fingers and your toes, waking your body up again. In your own time, you'll gather your knees into your chest, give them a squeeze, roll over onto whichever side you'd like, and come up to sit. As you sit yourself up, you'll bring the palms of your hands to touch at heart center, release your chin down. Namaste.